spoke in a strange language.
4 of us could hold them down.
It was the devil's work.
Different countries, different decades, different witnesses, but the stories kept coming back. Some ended in death, some ended in court, some inspired films, others still defied opinions to this day. Today we're looking at some of the most famous documented exorcism cases in modern history. The people were real, the investigations were real, and what happened afterwards, real. Let's start with the case that changed everything. Anneliese Michel, Germany, 1975. At first, there was nothing supernatural about her story. She was a young woman suffering from severe epileptic seizures. Doctors diagnosed her. Medication became prescribed, but instead of getting better, her condition appeared to get worse. Her family became convinced something far darker was happening. They claimed she heard voices, refused to enter churches, said holy objects, burned her, and believed she was being tormented by evil spirits. Eventually, the Catholic Church agreed to perform an exorcism. Not one, not two, 67. Yeah, 67. Over the course of almost a year. The rituals were recorded on tape, and even today, those recordings remain deeply disturbing to be listened to. Whether you believe she was possessed or suffering from severe mental illness, one thing is beyond dispute. This was a desperately ill young woman, and nobody found a way to save her. By the time the exorcisms ended, Anneliese weighed just over 4 stone. She was severely malnourished, dehydrated, covered in injuries from repeated convulsions. On the 1st of July 1976, she passed away. She was just 23 years old, but the story didn't end there, because afterwards the authorities launched a criminal investigation. Her parents and 2 priests were charged with negligent homicide. The court ruled that medical treatment should have continued alongside religious rituals. The convictions turned the case into one of the most famous exorcism stories in history, not because everyone agreed on what happened, but because nobody did. To some, Anneliese Michel was the victim of untreated mental illness. To others, she was the victim of something medicine could never explain. And nearly 50 years later, people still argue about it, because whatever happened inside that house, it left behind far more questions than answers. What the hell's that?
Spiritus obscuri manifestate.
85, what are you doing?
I'm preparing, Cheyenne.
Preparing for what, mate? What the hell are you doing?
The exorcism.
Mate, we're talking about exorcisms, we're not performing one. Now put the teddy away, bloody hell. Our next case takes us to South Africa, 1906. Clara Germana Cele was just 16 years old when those around her claimed her behaviour changed dramatically. According to reports from the convent where she lived, she suddenly began speaking languages she'd never been taught. Witnesses claimed she displayed unnatural strength, reacted violently to religious symbols, and appeared to know things she had no way of knowing. Word spread quickly. Eventually the church approved an exorcism. The ritual reportedly lasted 2 days, and afterwards those present claimed Clara returned completely to normal. Now, this case is over 100-year-old, so separating fact from folklore isn't easy. Some of the more dramatic claims, like levitation or speaking a dozen languages, come almost entirely from religious accounts written long after the events themselves, which means we should treat those parts with caution. What we do know is that the story spread around the world. It became one of the most frequently quoted possession cases in modern history. To believers, it was powerful evidence that exorcisms could work. To skeptics, it was another example of mental illness being misunderstood in an era when psychology was still in its infancy. Either way, the story of Clara survived for more than a century, not because everyone agrees, but because nobody has ever been able to prove exactly what happened. By 1981, the question wasn't whether someone was possessed, it was whether possession could be used as a legal defence. The case centred around Arne Cheyenne Johnson, a young man from Connecticut. Months earlier, an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel had reportedly undergone a series of exorcisms after claiming he was being tormented by a demonic presence. During one ritual, witnesses claimed Arne confronted whatever they were believing was haunting the boy. According to those present, he challenged it, telling the entity to leave the child and come into himself. Several months later, Arne stabbed his landlord, Alan Bono, to death. He was arrested almost immediately, and this is where the story took a turn nobody expected, because Arne's defence team didn't claim self-defence, they didn't claim insanity, they claimed demonic possession. It became known around the world as the devil made me do it case. The court refused to allow the defence. There was no legal way to prove possession, and no judge was prepared to put supernatural on trial. Arne was eventually convicted of first-degree manslaughter and served several years in prison. The case later inspired books, documentaries, and eventually The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. But behind the Hollywood version was a real death, a real court case, and a legal argument that has never been attempted before, because whatever happened that day, the courtroom wasn't deciding whether demons exist, it was deciding whether the law could ever recognise them. Our next case takes us a few miles away from where I live. 1974, Michael Taylor, an ordinary husband and father living in a town called Ossett, West Yorkshire. Friends described him as friendly, quiet, deeply religious, but after becoming involved with a local Christian prayer group, his behaviour began to change dramatically. Witnesses claimed he began increasingly aggressive, erratic, and at times completely unrecognisable. Those around him became convinced he was possessed. Eventually, 2 Anglican priests agreed to perform an exorcism. The ritual lasted for hours. According to those involved, they believed they had driven out the demons, but not all of them. The priests later claimed one remained, the demon of murder. Exhausted, they decided to continue the following day. They sent Michael home. I'm not going to lie, that feels a bit like watching half an horror film and deciding to finish tomorrow. Later that night, Michael brutally attacked his wife Christine. She died from injuries. When police arrived, they found Michael wandering the streets, naked, covered in blood. He reportedly told officers it was the devil's work. At his trial, he was found not guilty, not guilty, by reason of insanity and committed to a secure psychiatric hospital. To believers, the case remains one of Britain's most disturbing alleged possession stories. To skeptics, it's a tragic example of severe mental illness, religious influence, and system that failed everyone involved. Whatever the explanation, one thing's for certain, a family was destroyed. Our final case takes us back to the late 1940s. A 14-year-old boy known publicly only as Robbie Mynham, although some records his name as Ronald Doe. After the death of a close relative, his family claimed strange things began happening inside their home. Scratching noises, furniture moving, objects falling behind themselves. Then, they said, The activity centred around Robbie himself. Witnesses claimed his bed shook violently, marks appeared across his body, and words seemed to be scratched themselves into his skin. The family sought medical help. Psychiatric evaluations followed, but eventually they turned to the church. Several priests became involved. Over weeks of reported exorcism rituals, they described violent outbursts, deep growling voices, and movements they believed could not be explained. Now, unlike some of the other cases we've uncovered, there are no audio recordings, no courtroom, no criminal trial. Much of what survives come from diaries, letters, and accounts of who claimed to be there, which is exactly why the case is still debated today. Supporters believe Robbie's case is one of the strongest documented claims of possession ever investigated. Skeptics argue it can be explained through psychology, suggestion, and the power of belief. Whatever the truth, the story spreads far beyond the church. An author named William Peter Blatty heard about the case and used it as inspiration for a novel. That novel became a film, The Exorcist, a horror movie that terrified millions of people around the world and permanently changed the way popular culture viewed possession. But behind the spinning heads, the dramatic special effects, and Hollywood's version of events was a real family. So there they are, 5 documented exorcism cases that went horribly wrong. Some ended in death, some ended in court, some Hollywood films, and all of them are still debated today. Were these genuine cases of demonic possession, severely mental illnesses, religious misunderstandings, or something else still beyond our understanding? I don't know, and I don't think anyone will honestly be able to tell us the do. What we do know though is that these were not ghost stories. These are real cases with real people and sometimes real deaths. Perhaps that's why these cases refuse to disappear, not because everybody believed them, but because nobody has ever managed to explain every detail, and maybe that's what makes them so unsettling.
Shane, mate.
Yeah, mate?
Next week, can we go back to aliens?
Yeah, honestly, mate, after this one today, it's given me the creeps. So yeah, we will. Stay curious, my friends. Shane out.